All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we are excited to be presenting in partnership with Windfall. We have a fun and really in-depth discussion on the topic of wealth screening today. We know with year end coming up, this is something that is on everyone's mind, especially as we're trying to figure out where we can peer into any corner and find any potential areas of revenue. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into today's discussion. I have a couple of housekeeping items for you, so just answer any questions you might have at the top. So we are recording today's presentation. You will receive that in your inbox within 24 hours. So before I get anyone asking about that, you will get that sent to you. If you have any questions today, you can use your Zoom Q&A feature in your Zoom toolbar to ask questions. We may answer some during the presentation, or we may save them for the end. And if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with email. I'm thrilled to introduce today's speakers. We have two amazing folks from GivingDNA and Windfall to be giving this presentation today. The first is Dawn Galasso, who is our Vice President at GivingDNA. Dawn, would you mind sharing a few notes about yourself with our listeners today?
Yeah, thanks, Leah, and thanks for joining. I'm super excited about this topic. So I've been over a decade in the nonprofit space working with data analytics. I've worked at Wealth Engine and iWave and joined GivingDNA a little over a year ago. And I'm passionate about all things that are data driven. So super excited to with the topic today.
Awesome. We are also joined by Dan Stevens, not the actor, but someone who's just as exciting to sit down with. So Dan serves as the SVP and co-founder at Windfall. Dan, you've created an amazing product, and I'd love it if you shared some notes about yourself with our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited to be here and chatting with our partners here at GivingDNA. As Leah mentioned, I'm the co-founder here of Windfall. Our company is a data company, and specifically, we help nonprofits raise more money with better data, better insights in the context of wealth screening, career information, propensity modeling, and a few other things. But really excited to chat about our perspective on wealth data in general, and then specifically how we see this data being activated through our partnership with GivingDNA.
All right, thank you both so much. So Dawn, I think you have a bit of an explanation of our title today. So let's go right into that.
Yeah, so this is a 30-second video, and I'm just gonna let you watch the video that I got off of YouTube.
There he goes!
So I'm going to pause it there. First thing I have to say is that Dan and I were talking yesterday, and I didn't realize that the quality of TV that I grew up with has really been surpassed in recent years. That was just kind of frightening how bad the quality of that video was. But the reason why I brought up this video, and I use the term jump the shark, because I realized that some people don't know what jump the shark means. So Happy Days was a sitcom that was super popular in the 70s, and it went on for years and years. And then kind of towards the end, like with a lot of sitcoms, towards the end, they were losing viewership. It wasn't as fun, they kind of rerun the same stories over and over again. So they came up with this story plot that Fonzie was going to jump over a shark in this water. And basically it went over like lead, like people were laughing about it. Everyone was talking about it. And basically what they said, that the term jump the shark now means when you're past your prime, like you should have gone out last season, right? Like, so when we're talking about wealth screenings and the term jump the shark, what we really wanted to talk about is the fact that are traditional wealth screenings really the right tool for fundraising going forward, or have they jumped the shark? Are they past their prime? So hopefully that makes sense for the topic. we don't need to watch this again. So let's just kind of start with the agenda. What we're going to cover today is what is a traditional wealth screening, what data is essential to nonprofit organizations, why GivingDNA and Windfall have partnered, and then how we can help you between our partnership make your job easier. And we're going to be very specific with some tips and tricks around what we consider to be end of calendar year fundraising, those things that as your brain is starting to focus on, to Leah's point earlier, where can we get revenue at the end of the year? And so we're going to focus on Giving Tuesday, upgrade candidates, and key mid-level donors, and how you might be able to segment your data to get to those individuals, or use our platforms combined to get to those individuals and do the next things to ensure that you get them to give you by the end of this year. So I like to think that the old way of doing wealth screenings is no longer as efficient as it used to be. There's a couple of reasons why philosophically I believe that. The first thing is that typically, if you have done wealth screenings in the past, you have screened your file typically between every 3 and 5 years. So you send your file out, whether you're a small team and you've got 10,000 records or less, or you're a big team and you've got hundreds of thousands of records, the team size is really to how much you can handle in any given space. So, my clients in the past, they would typically screen their file every 3 to 5 years. That data would come back in a flat file, maybe have been delivered back into some type of a platform. And now you have to work through that data. So what a lot of my clients would say when I would go back to them is, I love the data, but I only use about 3 to 5% of it. I look at my top scored individuals and I throw the rest of the file away. And it takes me a long time to do the prospect research for validation on the file as well. So I feel like I'm spending money on things that I'm not getting a ton of value out of, and it's very time consuming to work through that, which is why we're only screening on an infrequent basis. My concern always with that was, well, you're screening every 3 to 5 years, and I'm just going to use Giving Tuesday as an example. A lot of very philanthropic people use Giving Tuesday as a way to test new nonprofits that they are thinking about supporting. So what they might choose to do on Giving Tuesday is give $25 to 10 different organizations that they've had their eye on. And what they're testing for is, what is the experience what's the donor journey from my first gift on Giving Tuesday? If you're not looking at those people on a much more regular basis, you don't know how to cultivate the relationship with them. What's their in their heart that matches your mission? Are they philanthropic at high levels, and should they be assigned to a gift officer potentially? So you could have 2 people that gave $25 each on the same day. One person may only be able to give you $25 every year for the rest of their life. The other person may look very different. And how do we engage those individuals based on what we know about them? So that traditional 3 to 5 year screening, I feel like you're continuously missing opportunities on new donors in your file and donors whose wealth is changing on a more regular basis. The other thing is that typical wealth screenings do very little analysis of your internal data. So by this, I mean, you're going to upload part of your gift file. So typically they'll ask you, upload your the donor's first gift, last gift, how many gifts they've given. And they're asking you for this just so they can create an RFM score. So if you're not familiar with an RFM score, it just means recency, frequency, and monetary. And basically what we're looking for is those donors who gave recently, frequently, and are giving more. And that's how we get to that RFM score. It's basically how connected is that donor to your organization. But they don't look at any other data. But the internal data that your donors are behaving with you can be critical in uncovering opportunities of things like planned giving, because we know typically somebody who's ideal for planned giving is that individual who's been on your file giving giving 8 of the last 10 years, or has been on your monthly donor file for the last 3 years concurrently. And we need to look at those internal data points as we predict things like planned giving. Another thing is that typically the data is only refreshed very infrequently, maybe quarterly, maybe annually, sometimes even less frequently than that. So a lot of times the outcomes are not as accurate because the data is not as accurate. To go back to my first bullet point, a lot of the clients say, yeah, the wealth screenings are great to fuel major gift fundraising, but we have a whole bunch of different fundraising strategies. We have an annual fund. We have monthly givers that we're trying to identify. We may be trying to identify crypto donors or those planned giving prospects, or even donors that are ripe for upgrade. And I really need to fuel all aspects of that fundraising strategy. But I feel like that traditional wealth screening, all it feeds is maybe that one piece of it. And then because of all of this, the accuracy of the scores and the data start to be very questionable. So we want to talk about data and why we have partnered with Windfall. And one of the reasons is their approach to data and the reliability of that data when it comes to being able to provide the right net worth of those individuals. So Dan, I'll let you take this slide and let's just discuss this a little further.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dawn. So I think what we wanted to get into here is sort of digging into some of the underlying sources of data that you might find in a traditional wealth screening tool, as well as examine some of the deficiencies in that data and how it can lead to sort of bad decisioning if you don't have a granular understanding of who your donors are. So, the first point here is that a lot of the underlying sort of wealth data in particular from some of these legacy tools is based on survey data, census data that gets extrapolated out at sort of a neighborhood level. So if you look at some of the traditional third-party data providers out there, there are limitations in terms of the high end of wealth that they're able to provide. And so really you get no differentiation between two neighbors that live in the same neighborhood that may have vastly different wealth profiles. So over here on the left, we have a example individual of a Jane Doe, where you might get these ranges of net worth that have sort of limitations and caps on the high end, and categorize Jane as being worth $500,000 to $1 million. While the reality might be, if you have a truly predictive model with granular net worth estimates, she's actually closer to $8.2 million. I think some of the other underlying data fidelity issues that we'll dig into here have to do with other attributes that are predictors of somebody's ability to give. So one thing we'll talk about here in a bit is career information. Understanding somebody's position in a company and understanding what that company is can be huge for a number of things, including corporate giving, but also as predictors of future wealth. And so making sure that you have data that's actually deterministic as we talk about it, meaning matched one-to-one to the right individual, is absolutely critical in sort of forming your ask amounts. Dawn mentioned the data refresh being infrequent. Here at Windfall, we update our data every week. And so through our partnership with GivingDNA, that data gets pushed out to our customers. Data is actually wealth is actually quite dynamic. So one statistic I like to take a look at is when the pandemic hit in 2020, we saw in our Windfall millionaire database a 6% drop in the overall number of millionaires, with a ton of growth on sort of the high end of wealth. So having that data and a real-time economic overlay is incredibly valuable in predicting, what somebody's able to give.
Well, and also Dan, just on that point is like, look at what's happened in the stock market since March or since the beginning of the year, right? Everyone's 401ks are down 35%, right? And so to your point, less than 6 months, super dynamic. Wealth could look very, very differently. And we've all talked to the prospect researcher who's run into this exact thing where they did research on an individual and it said one thing, and then they got to the reality of it, and it can be in either direction, right? Like it can be falsely high and it can be falsely low. And so the reason why, our partnership, and I'm so excited about it, is because you guys are so accurate with looking at so many different data points and then analyzing them to get to a true net worth that's much more accurate.
Yep. And that speaks nicely to the last point in terms of the billions of dollars that are wasted due to inaccurate data sources. An overall study of sort of the marketing industry, so not just nonprofit, recently estimated $20 billion of waste based on marketing with bad data. So as we all know, sending direct mail solicitations can be expensive on a per piece basis. And so if you're starting with a foundation of kind of questionable data, the returns on those very large investments are diminished.
Dan, can you talk high level to me about how you guys look at data different than a traditional wealth screening would look at it, from the standpoint of what you're doing with real estate across the country, what you're doing with, some of those additional data sets that you guys, and we're going to jump more into the data, but just kind of high level, because I think people tend to think a wealth screening is a wealth screening is a wealth screening. And while some of the data is familiar across different wealth screening companies, what you do with that data is very different. So can you high level that for us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I think about, data accuracy, there's kind of two vectors. One is, the underlying data that you're feeding into a wealth model. And then two is the matching of a particular data point to a particular household. So I'll touch on each. So, for example, with wealth modeling, all wealth screening companies will use some measure of public data, real estate being a relatively common, first point to start with. Now, there are a lot of pitfalls with that data if you're just taking it at face value and not doing any kind of modeling and curation on top of that public data, real estate being a fantastic example. So, if you look at automated valuation models for real estate, think Zillow estimate, Zestimate, above $3 million, because those models rely specifically on comparable transactions, there simply aren't enough data points to accurately predict the value of, expensive homes. So, our solution there is we built kind of a state-by-state, county-by-county per square foot real estate valuation model that is much more granular and accurate, particularly when looking at high-value real estate. On the flip side, nobody else in wealth screening takes a look at the debt side of the balance sheet. So our company's based here in San Francisco, where most real estate is worth more than $1 million. But if you have an $800,000 mortgage against that property and you're using, just the value of the property as your sole predictor of wealth, you're not going to do a great job at really understanding that individual's capacity. The second point I made was around the matching of how a given data point to a household. What we see in the industry is a lot of what we would call fuzzy matching. So I have a very common name, Dan Stevens. When you look at things like past giving and how that's tied back to my profile, it's really done just on a fuzzy name basis. So you might pull up my profile in a wealth screening solution and see 200 gifts from a Dan Stevens that's not me, and that individual happens to give quite a bit. And so you're going to be taken down the wrong path if you're not using what we would call deterministic matching, being not just the fuzzy name, but where does this Dan Stevens actually live? And can we make that association? And our approach to matching is to provide no false positives. So if we don't have that confirmatory data point, we'd rather return a null result than a false positive.
I love that, because I think we're aligned on that from a GivingDNA and a Windfall perspective, which is we would rather match less people with a higher quality of data than match more people with you having to do so much validation of that data. And so to your point, we allow for a toggle between, matching at the name and the address exactly, and then a looser one, and then a looser one, so that you can kind of go in between. But the idea is that, especially for major gift fundraising, you need to have high quality data, right? And prospect research is so important, but you want to be able to prospect research as fast as possible with the accuracy that you can. So thank you so much for that. And like I said, I mean, I talk to people all the time that run into this exact same issue consistently. And that other issue is the real estate thing, right? Like, okay, somebody owns $1 million home in San Francisco. That's not the same as if somebody who owns $1 million home in rural Nebraska, right? I mean, those are two different donors for the most part. Other data may align better. Maybe the person just lives way below their means, but in reality, from a starting point, they look very different. But most wealth vendors aren't able to make those adjustments. And so a lot of times, if you're raising money on the coasts, in California or in New York City, you're getting a lot of false positives just because of that factor. Bear with me. Okay, so this one is the next one for you, Dan, just to kind of dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the things that we heard when we started Windfall, like our whole approach was really around forming a better prediction of net worth. Now, the natural extension of that most fundraisers want to understand is how does wealth and other indicators of wealth play into my ask. What is the gift capacity of a particular household? And I've put some examples up here on how folks have traditionally thought about taking a wealth signal and then deriving sort of a gift capacity. So some of those things that folks would look at, I mentioned historical giving being an interesting predictor and the pitfalls around that, but then also real estate holdings. So I'm going to dig into an example here that kind of discusses the net worth and the balance sheet more so than that particular real estate indicator. So, one study that we like to cite here from KCI that came out a few years ago utilized real estate value as a predictor of gift capacity. Their study found that using a proxy of 20 to 25% of real estate holdings, the value of those real estate holdings could be a good predictor of that gift capacity over 5 years. We see this as a fairly typical time period to estimate total philanthropic giving. And then you can kind of break that down year by year, charity by charity, to understand what you might be able to glean from that particular donor. So I've laid out an example here, David Jones. Let's say, we know his address. We know it's a $3.5 million home. We don't know much more. So applying this methodology here to estimate the gift capacity, taking 20% of the value of that would show a 5-year gift capacity of $700,000 and an annual gift capacity of $140,000. Seems like a great, major gift prospect, depending on the size of major gift your institution is looking for.
Exactly.
And then if we flip to the next page here, this is kind of the windfall approach. We would argue that net worth is a much better representation of the dollars that you might be able to target from a particular individual. And the first thing we like to do is just define net worth, right? So if you think of a company's balance sheet, right? Assets less liabilities equals equity. Same thing here, assets less liabilities equals the net worth. And this less liabilities component is incredibly important, as we'll see here in this example. So taking this same David Jones, of course, we're not going to have visibility into 100% of his assets, but through modeling and lookalikes, we're able to understand that there are other assets here for somebody that owns a $3.5 million home. So when you add up all those assets, this individual has, kind of well into the high four millions of dollars of assets. Now, factoring in his liability, as I alluded to this with the San Francisco real estate example, the mortgage debt on this property is actually $2 million. There may be some other smaller lines of debt, such as car loans, credit card debt. But if you look at the vast majority of consumer debt in the US, it's 90+% mortgage debt. So really, that's the most important input to kind of netting out the debt side of the balance sheet. So doing the simple math there, we're left with a net worth of $2.5 million. And then the sort of typical percentage rate that a fundraiser would apply to look at total philanthropic capacity, industry standards, kind of 5%. So as we see here, this is a much lower target ask amount here for this particular individual than you would find under the traditional methodology, right? So taking 5% of that net worth, netting out all of those other liabilities, we're left with around $130,000 of gift capacity, which annualizes to $25,000. So why this is so important, I think, is relatively obvious. But if you're going in with an ask of 140 and the capacity is 25, you're going to, offend some people. And then I think on the flip side, you could be leaving money on the table if you don't have kind of that accurate picture of the full balance sheet before forming your ask.
Yeah, I love that. And just to your point, a lot of this is modeled. So they behind the scenes create a lookalike model based on the data that they know is accurate. And then they can extrapolate some of these other assets and liabilities based on that. But one of the ones in particular that I found that I think you guys do very interestingly is the mortgage. And that is that some other data vendors will look at a mortgage and make some adjustments based on, hey, this person's got $1 million home and they got a $900,000 mortgage. So let's make a little bit of a capacity adjustment. The problem is that you only know what the mortgage is the day it's recorded. You don't know how much it's worth 10 years, how much is it 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And so talk to me a little bit about what you guys have built to accommodate that so that you're not looking at that initial mortgage and making assumptions that you actually can kind of get to real time on it.
Yeah, great question. So to be clear, like all mortgages are recorded at the county recorder, right? So whether it's the first purchase, a home equity line of credit, a second mortgage, any kind of debt that's taken out against a property is recorded in the public records. So it's an incredibly valuable source that can be taken advantage of. What we do here at Windfall is we have what we call a debt amortization model that takes a look at, okay, what was the kind of interest rate at the time, typical interest rate at the time that the mortgage was recorded, and then, making some assumptions around what would be a typical, 30-year fixed rate mortgage and how that debt sort of amortizes and is paid down over time. So maybe 10 years in, this $2 million balance has come down to, $1.5 million. It's an important view, right? Because those monthly mortgage payments are a persistent cash flow, but at the same time, the overall sort of balance sheet of the household has improved as that debt is paid down.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I think this is just like, again, talking about the next level, a little bit more sophistication when it comes to being as granular as possible on this, because, if that debt was $50,000, if that mortgage was $500,000 less, it's, it's going to make a difference on that net worth and what that ask amount might be. Yeah. So thanks so much for that. That's like brilliant. I love everything that you guys are doing when it comes to that. So, when we're just kind of culminate on what we just talked about, the idea of the relationship and partnership between GivingDNA and Windfall, you can see here that our bullet points are that, the Windfall data, they focus on more on high net worth individuals. GivingDNA focuses kind of across the board. And so we kind of complement each other when it comes to the data that we're looking at. It's all modeled at the household level. We've got precise net worth amounts. They're not ranges. They are precise down to the $100,000 with the Windfall data. So, you've got somebody who is between the $5 and $10 million capacity or net worth amount. That person could look very, very different. So we want to have very specific amounts on that net worth. The data is refreshed for Windfall weekly. At GivingDNA, we actually refresh ours every month. So you're getting a complete refresh of all data weekly or monthly, depending on what data set it is. And we do unlimited refreshes, as well as Dan mentioned, wealth is dynamic. And of course, a lot of these things are not done on traditional wealth screenings. The underlying data for a typical wealth screening is typically a ZIP +4, relies heavily, as Dan mentioned, on survey and census data. They typically will come in ranges and not precise figures, which, especially on that upper end, the ranges can really swing a lot when it comes to, how much money somebody has. The data is refreshed less frequently, leading to stale data that can miss on wealth. Or on the flip side, when wealth goes down, to Dan's point, through the pandemic, or more recently, through shifts in the stock market, we need to make sure we're looking at that wealth in real time so that we're making the right decisions. And then, refreshing that data as frequently as possible, that whole idea of not screening every 3 to 5 years. Our methodology behind that, our philosophy behind what both Windfall and GivingDNA is that we want you to screen, to upload your file as frequently as possible. The behaviors, not just your external data is changing frequently, but the internal behaviors that these donors are exhibiting is doing the same thing. So whether it's a new donor or it's a donor that's exhibiting behavior that looks like they would be a good monthly giver, we need to be looking at that data both internally and externally much more frequently so that we can identify people that are trending in certain directions and communicate with them at the time that those trends are happening. So let's talk a little bit, Dan, about the Windfall data fields that we have up here. Some of them might look a little familiar to a traditional wealth screening, but you guys have some that are quite unique.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just highlight a few of these and some use cases here that I think are particularly interesting for this audience. So we've touched on the net worth estimate, but really that's the very granular household level prediction of net worth down to the 100,000. Of course, that's an incredibly valuable input here. Some of these other things have to do with changes in the household, things like recent move, divorce, and death. Those can represent both changes in the household's wealth, as well as reasons to maybe suppress somebody out of a particular campaign, or to just kind of take greater care given the change in context of that household. I think another one that is interesting to take a look at is philanthropic cause. We've found this to be an incredibly useful predictor of affinity and kind of case for support for your particular organization. And this is really just analyzing what are the types of causes that this household's giving to otherwise. So we talked about kind of that 5-year capacity. That's total philanthropic capacity. So, you're fighting for those dollars with other charities, but building an understanding of where this household's, affinities and areas of support lie is incredibly predictive in, driving that affinity for your household. Another one to highlight here is trust association. This is one that is pretty unique to Windfall as well. Trust association just means that we've found that a household has its assets protected in some sort of LLC or trust, which for us is an indicator of both financial and legal sophistication. So it tends to correlate nicely with wealth. It also is predictive of things like, is this person potentially giving from a DAF, right? A donor advised fund. Usually the folks that are putting their home in trust have some sort of wealth or legal advisor that might be advising on things like, making their philanthropic dollars more tax efficient. And so this has been a really interesting place to find hidden gems that you might not have seen in your file otherwise. Similarly, these people are the ones that are best at hiding their wealth. And, again, if matching to that public data around their home is obscured by an LLC or trust, it takes multi-sourcing lots of different third-party data sets to uncover who is behind that household. And that's something that we're really excited about here with partnering with GivingDNA, is being able to surface more of those individuals that you might not be able to match to in a typical tool. And then one more to highlight here is the multi-property owner, number 17. I think another challenge that we've seen in the industry is accurately tying together all of the real estate holdings across different geographies. So you might have a wealthy donor household based in New York that has a secondary property in Florida. And again, if it's kind of obscured by a trust, it's going to be really hard to associate those households together. But by having Windfall surface that information for you, multi-property ownership is a great input to plan giving opportunities, also to understanding, potential other streams of income if it's a rental property, for example. And so just a few highlights from our typical wealth screening data dictionary that I think are fairly differentiated here. One more to point out is small business ownership. I think that's another unique one. A very large percentage of personal wealth in the US is tied up in Main Street businesses, doctors, dental offices, convenience stores, supermarkets. These are not typically inputs to other wealth models. And so you're really not capturing the full picture if you're not able to look at who owns a business and how that might be affecting their household balance sheet.
Yeah, that's great. And just to kind of, again, why we're collaborating and why we've created this partnership is, what GivingDNA does really well is it helps you segment your database based on data, right? And so, the typical wealth screening, you would get a flat file back and you would kind of have to do some pivot tables and segmentation on your own. With GivingDNA and being fueled with some of the data from Windfall, we're able to take data and give you those opportunity segments. So the trust one, as an example, we will be working on an opportunity segment that's looking at people that are in your database that look like they would be donor advised fund givers. We are going into an economic, at least a questionable economic future over the next 6 to 12 months, as everyone probably hears about on TV and everywhere else. We were at a conference last week and we talked about this a lot, that donor advised funds is a place to really focus over the next 6 to 12 months. And the reason why is because that money's already in the fund. They've already spent that money, right? So it's not like they have to take money out of their pocket. It's already assigned for philanthropic giving. And so identifying donors in your database that love you, potentially also have high wealth and are affiliated with trusts, using those data points, we can drive this opportunity segment and give you, these are the 200 people in your database that look like they would have donor advised funds because they've got the data the data points that we know are indicative of having a donor advised fund. And you would have that right at your fingertips. You wouldn't have to do all of this, different criteria on your own. We're pulling that data together and giving you this opportunity segment. So
Great.
let's talk career intelligence, because this one it really excites me.
Yeah, so we essentially at Windfall have two levels of our wealth screening service. Kind of the core wealth screening that you saw on the last page, and then this recently released career intelligence data that is also available in the GivingDNA platform. I think career data has been used traditionally quite well by educational institutions to kind of track alumni, their careers, how those careers are progressing. But the applications and insights that we see across all different types of nonprofit are incredibly impactful. So I'll call out a couple of kind of use cases for this data. Essentially, this data tells you where a person works, their title, their level, a bit about their job changes, as well as some of the firmographic information about the firms that they work for. So there's tons of potential use cases for this kind of data. One that we've seen and our customers have pushed us on is diversifying your donor base. So, wealth screening might surface those folks that are not the most diverse donors, have wealth, and, are going to be impactful from a major gift perspective. But one use for career data is starting to track people that are in career tracks that are building their wealth. This is a great way to find those kind of up and coming folks that maybe from a more diverse background that, are lawyers, doctors, executives that are kind of climbing the ladder of wealth. And starting your stewardship with these individuals early can bear fruit later on. I think another thing is, board membership, recruiting boards, very helpful to understand where people work and how that might impact, their ability or interest in joining a board. Corporate giving is another one. So if you start to see a bunch of donors that are from the same corporation, is there something that you can put together from a strategic standpoint to land corporate sponsorship or gifts or otherwise? And so, really career is just another layer on top of wealth that helps you segment further and identify those rising stars at companies that you might have an opportunity to engage with as well.
Awesome. So we'll talk a little bit about the GivingDNA data set, because, our partnership is a collaboration where we have different data. And so the GivingDNA data set is focused on relationship building as well as understanding your donors at different levels, just like the Windfall data is very career and financial driven. So when you think about GivingDNA and how this partnership actually aligns, we give you demographic information. So this is an information that you have in your file. When you upload your file with us, we append all of this data onto it. And so it's anything from age and gender to ethnicity for DE&I purposes. A lot of our clients are very interested in making sure that they're diversifying their donor database that way. The number of children that they have in the household, where are they on a map? And we geolocate them down to the county. So from a major gift perspective, you're going out into an area to visit, your 5 major donors you need to see, but are there 3 prospects that we can provide to you through the collaboration between the Windfall data and the GivingDNA data that says this person looks like they would be a really good major gift prospect, and you can pick up the phone maybe and call them and see if you can get an appointment with them. We've got financial data as well, so household income, net worth, estimated home value, and predicted discretionary spending is one we really like. We've got life stage, political view from a psychographic perspective, giving behaviors, giving affinities, donation amounts. And then one that we really like is communication preferences. So when you think about not just that you're doing a wealth screening, but what can this data do to drive and build better relationships? So the overlay of the GivingDNA and Windfall data together allows for us to understand donors at different levels, but then also how to communicate with them. As an example, different age ranges might want different salutations, right? So the 65 and older, they may want Mr. or Mrs. in front of their name. Younger generation of donors, they may not. So it's not just about who you should be speaking to, but it's also about how you should be speaking to them. So we actually can provide you communication preferences so that you know who's phone responsive versus mail responsive, to optimize your direct mail, to look for your omni-channel donors, those that are responsive in all different categories. And then also who are your social media influencers. As you go to Giving Tuesday, you might grab just your social media influencers and ask all of them who may not be at a point where they can actually support you or support you at any high level, and just say, hey, share something about my organization going into Giving Tuesday. And you may find that 6 degrees of separation with that whole new group, with a whole new group of people, because a social media influencer suggested that. So again, we're super excited to form this partnership with GivingDNA and Windfall. We really do believe that it's the future of wealth screenings. Just to kind of go back on some of the things that we have talked about, because of the partnership, some of the things that we believe you should start thinking about when it comes to traditional wealth screening. Is that the route you want to take in the future? Is do I feel like I need to screen my file more frequently? Do I feel like I'm missing opportunities that bubble up in that 3 to 5 year period, and all of a sudden I say, oh, this new donor that gave to us 2 years ago could give to us a lot more, but we didn't realize it, so we haven't been cultivating that relationship. We've just had them on our annual fund for several years. You know, making sure your data is updated as frequently as possible. Being able to upload unlimited first-party data and query on your internal first-party data on any data points that you may have and want to look at. Board affiliations, whether they're a patient or a non-patient. These are data points that you're going to want to look at and maybe query on, and segment those groups for different types of communications. Analysis of the internal gift data on your file, so that we can look for behavioral changes when your donors starting to exhibit different behaviors within your file, whether it's they gave once in 2020, twice in 2021, they've already given us 2 or 3 gifts this year. They look like they are wanting to move to a monthly giver, and we can give you that opportunity segment. Again, using wealth screenings and using every piece of the wealth screening, right? Not just using it for the major gifts, but using it for all levels of fundraising strategy. And then being able to optimize your mid and major gift officers through a management and portfolio tool within the GivingDNA platform that is, again, fueled by that really rich Windfall data also. So how do we help? It's super easy. You just upload your CSV file, unless you have a CRM that we're integrated with, but you just upload that CSV file. We ingest the data, and then we append the external GivingDNA and Windfall data onto that. We use AI to model donor opportunities behind the scenes. So we're looking at, again, things like, this donor has been on my file 8 of the last 10 years giving, or 3 of the last 4 years on my monthly giving program. They're showing that they're a big fan of ours, and they're also at the right age that they're writing their will. They don't have the evidence of children in home, which we know is not a great time to ask somebody to incorporate them in their will. This looks like a good planned giving prospect. So all of our different algorithms that we're using to bubble up this data. And we provide you actionable segments on that. So here's your planned giving opportunities. Here's your monthly giving opportunities. Here's your major gift opportunities. Here's major gift opportunities that you guys haven't even looked at yet, and being able to really focus on those through actionable next steps. So we wanted to give you a couple of easy next steps and tips, maybe as you're thinking about going into the end of year, that you could maybe do within your CRM with the data you have, but you most certainly could do between the partnership with GivingDNA and Windfall very, very quickly and easily. So the first one that we were thinking of is Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is coming up. If you're interested in doing Giving Tuesday, or you've thought about it, or yes, you're all in. We actually had a client last year who was not really into Giving Tuesday. They had kind of tried it, didn't really have a lot of ROI on it. They felt like it took a lot of time to do it, but they actually had a corporation that came to them at the beginning of November and said, we will match your Giving Tuesday gifts up to $40,000. If you can raise $40,000, we'll match it for 40,000, but you have to raise the 40,000 for us to match it. So they said, okay, well, we need to find who we're going to focus on. So they jumped into their GivingDNA platform, and the first thing they said is, well, we want to look at people who gave this time last year, because traditionally people give at the same time each year. So they had a much larger file, but they said, okay, I just want the people who gave last year, so 2021, from November to December. Then they said, and we want to make sure that they have higher capacity. So for this particular instance, I used predicted discretionary spending. We could use net worth. I have that one on another one. But if you have net worth in your file, you could have pulled out people who gave last year who have a certain net worth or, a philanthropy score, or however you want to query on that. And then they knew they were going to pick up the phone and call all of these individuals. And so you can see this group keeps getting smaller and smaller. So I started with like 3,000. And then as I added that I wanted them to have higher predicted discretionary spending, it made that list a little bit smaller. And I end up with a list of 57 people who are extremely likely to pick up the phone. They did this exact same thing. Called those, I think they ended up with 74 people, but called those people on the phone, asked them if they would be interested in giving on Giving Tuesday, actually solidified most of their Giving Tuesday gifts prior to Giving Tuesday. So they felt very good going into Giving Tuesday. They ended up raising $46,000 and got that corporate match of another 40,000. So from a very satisfying Giving Tuesday experience, they ended up having a Giving Tuesday that was highly successful, and they were super excited about that. So that would be one suggestion is grab that list of people who haven't given, who gave to you last year at this time, who have a higher net worth. If you have data around phone responsiveness, great. If not, we can certainly give you that information. The second one that we were going to focus on was multi-year mid-level donors. So these are those donors that give to you year over year, but maybe they haven't given to you that yet in this calendar year. And so we actually have a segment that's called key multi-year donors, and we've got 1,900 in this example, 1,900 people that are designated as key multi-year donors. Now I want to overlay. And you can get that data out in some ways from your CRM as well. But now I'm going to overlay net worth. I use two examples here because we are still working on the final Windfall integration dashboard. So I actually used the current GivingDNA dashboard here to look at net worth over 2 million. But Windfall actually is much more granular than this. I just got this off of a report that they provided to me for something. But basically this shows you that I can get, with the Windfall data, I'm going to be able to get much more granular. I might not want to just focus on these 200. I might say I only want to focus on these, what is this, about 130 people around there that are at that really high net worth level. So I could just grab my Windfall data set and say, I just want to focus on my super uber high net worth individuals. And I'm going to call that list even lower. And then I'm going to look at those individuals who, bear with me one second. Sorry, I think I went backwards instead of forward. Okay, so now I've identified those high net worth individuals. And again, for these people, I'm going to want people who are phone responsive. And the reason why I want those phone responsive is because this is a small group of key donors that most likely give to lots of different organizations and are probably getting, an email or a direct mail piece from each of them multiple times. But very few of them are picking up the phone and calling. So I really want to set my nonprofit apart. And so I don't want to waste time calling people that aren't going to be phone responsive, but I can just grab those that are phone responsive and call them, nicely say, we miss you, right? You don't want to say, hey, you haven't given us a gift this year, but you could say, hey, we miss you. Thank you so much for your gift in November or December of last year, whatever the case may be. And now I'm cultivating and reestablishing that relationship with my key multi-year donors. And then the last one is upgrade candidates. So as we again think about, this year is kind of an interesting year from an inflation perspective. We've got donors that most likely might have to give a little bit less, maybe even lapse in this given year. So we need to identify those those opportunities for donors that are primed to give more. So you can grab the segment in the GivingDNA platform that's fueled by the Windfall and GivingDNA data that says these individuals are primed to give more. What does that mean? It means we've looked at your internal giving to your, that these donors are exhibiting in your file, and the external data that we have on them, and it doesn't match. The internal giving has them giving at lower levels than we're seeing them give externally. So they should be interested in giving more. So I could grab that group of individuals that had given me last year. So again, I've just grabbed this group and then matched it to people who gave in last year. And then lastly, I might make sure that they are interested in supporting causes like ours, right? They might not be giving to causes like ours or maybe giving at lower levels. They're just not jazzed about our mission. But I want to identify those that are interested in our mission, and even those that might have an alignment with our mission that maybe we haven't expressed as well as we can. An example would be a hospital who has an arts therapy program. Okay, well, I might talk to these people about my arts therapy program. Maybe that's how I get those individuals to upgrade instead. So, again, this is a very cultivated group of individuals that I'm going to ask for more to try to offset any potential downgrades that we have going forward. So hopefully these tips were kind of helpful for you to start thinking about. And I'm sure everyone's had year end on their mind for a while, but certainly happy to chat any of that through with you guys. So Dan, thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Before we finish up, I wanted to let you know that coming to your inbox, we're going to be supplying you 5 additional keys to data-driven fundraising for year end. So that's coming to you. And Dan, I know you guys at Windfall have a special offer also.
Yeah, absolutely. So we find this to be a super useful tool as folks are starting to think about precision around their wealth screening. We offer what we call a free wealth analytics report. Essentially, this is a segmentation of your donor base to show you exactly how many people we're able to match to with precision, and then the segmentation of those individuals at different wealth levels. So we find this to be a very effective way to start to uncover the pockets of hidden gems. It's a little hard to read on this report, but if you look at the 20 million donors, or $20 million plus high net worth donors that you have in your database, there are 49 of them. And in this report, they've given $7,000. That seems like a very rich opportunity for major gift hidden gem prospecting. So feel free to fill out this link here, analytics.windfalldata.com, and we can get you an analysis like this back in about 24 hours.
And it's amazing the insights that come out of that. The report is actually more robust than this. We just screenshotted a little bit of it just to give you a taste, but it goes into a lot of detail where you could see immediately whether you are on track with your fundraising, or if you might have some opportunities. And most of the time, we've been seeing some pretty amazing opportunities that are available within this. So with that, what I'd like to do, Leah, is open it up for questions and see if anybody has any thoughts or questions that we might be able to answer.
Yes, yeah, we had a couple of questions come in that I went ahead and answered because I think they were kind of answered over the course of the presentation. But I'll kind of go from, I think, quick to answer versus longer answers. So the first one, is there a Salesforce integration so that CSV uploading is not needed? And you might have 2 different answers depending on the platform.
Yeah, so if you are using the combination of GivingDNA and Windfall, we do have a Salesforce integration at GivingDNA. I always caveat it by saying that Salesforce is unlimitedly configurable. So if you have had someone come in and highly customize your Salesforce instance, sometimes it takes a little bit more schmoozing to get it to work, but for the most part, it works pretty seamlessly for everybody. And I know Windfall has on their own has a Salesforce integration, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you are on Salesforce and want that wealth analytics report, the API integration that we have is what facilitates that coming back in less than 24 hours. So it's a very robust integration.
Yeah.
Awesome. This came in fairly early on in the webinar. So can you create lists for acquisition mail appeals?
Yeah, absolutely. So from an acquisition list, basically what we would suggest is we have, when you upload your file, we have all the people in your database that are non-donors that you want to convert to donors. We've actually just produced a new opportunities segment called philanthropic non-donors. So those donors that are in your database, they're in your database for some reason, but they're not giving to you yet. And so who are those individuals? And also further identifying those that are actively philanthropic with other organizations. So you just need to make your cause for support better. We're hearing that, right now when donors are trying to decide what 3 of 5 organizations they may support, acquisition becomes a little bit more difficult because people aren't going out and, if you get a list, and I'm not saying don't do your list, but what I'm saying is that might take a longer time to convert than it normally would have in the past, because donors are actually going to be supporting the causes that they've supported in the past and maybe even pulling back a little bit. But those donors that are those constituents that are in your file that are non-donors, maybe they attended an event, maybe they downloaded some information off of your website. They already have at least a starting relationship with you. So it's a much shorter conversion perspective for them versus net new names.
Let's see. So we had a good question from Linda, who asked, what does political affiliation tend to suggest to fundraisers? So how's that information helpful?
Yeah, I can address that. So there's a few different things. I think certain causes obviously lean one way or the other, politically. So that's one great way to tease out who might have a higher propensity or affinity for your cause there. I think the other thing is, around political donations, there tends to be a pretty high correlation between people that, support political campaigns versus nonprofit campaigns. The other thing is thinking about the tax deductibility of charitable donations versus political donations. Political donations are not tax deductible. And so when you see those very large political donations, it's almost like you can gross up what their potential is to give on the charitable side.
I'll actually give kind of a personal example as well with that. And that is that understanding the political leanings of your file, a lot of times nonprofits, especially if they do lean to one side or the other side more, think that their file also leans to that side or the other. But frequently that's not the case. And an example that I'll give you is happened 4 or 5 years back with another organization that I worked at. We did a modeling project for a faith-based organization. It was a minister, very famous minister. Had a huge ministry, and this particular minister decided he wanted to get more politically active and take a political stand. That was definitely on one side versus the other side. At the time, we were completing the modeling project for them, and I said to them, that's fine, but do you realize that half of your file actually leans the other way? And they were like, no, our file is definitely leans this way versus this way, right? And I was like, no, the data says that really, it's about a 50-50 split. They decided that, he was very compelled to talk about these political things in the way that he wanted to talk about them. But what ended up happening is they ended up losing a lot of their donors. And so understanding how your political makeup is also helpful in having the right conversations with people when they might not typically align with how you thought they would align.
So let's see, looking through. So there's a few questions in here that it's around the partnership between GivingDNA and Windfall. So about how this data will be visualized in GivingDNA, and if it's something that currently exists in GivingDNA's current instance, or if it's something that will be rolling out in the future, and also just if it's going to be something included or an add-on.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is an additional charge for the Windfall dashboard within the GivingDNA platform, and it currently, we can do it currently right now. Right now, the dashboard's not completed. That's the reason why I have to use that little Windfall graphic instead of using an actual graphic dashboard for Windfall. But it's in process, and we think it's 2 to 4 weeks away from going live. So it will be available. But we actually have the data available now. You would just have to use a custom field to query on it versus having the dashboard. So it's a little bit of an extra step over the short term, but within about 4 weeks, we're going to have it much more actionable within the platform, and then continuing to build out based on the data that we're now having from Windfall. So some of those opportunity segments when we talked about, extra property. Okay, great for plan giving. Ask them to put that extra property in your will. The trust information. These are your donor advised prospects, that type of thing.
All right. So this may be more of a philosophical question, but maybe it's appropriate given our topic today on wealth. But one person observed that during turbulent financial times, easily the last 3 years, it appears the wealthy get wealthier. They noticed that high-end segment giving seemed to increase in 2020 and 2021. Any comments on that as we wrap up today?
I would say that that's very consistent with what we've observed in our data set, right? The wealthy have gotten wealthier. I mean, I think that the stock market declines of the very recent months have bucked that trend a little bit, but like certainly during COVID and the pandemic, we definitely saw that as a dynamic. I think the other thing that we've examined is in past recessions, how does individual giving hold up? And really what you see is it's kind of fairly resilient overall with single percentage point drops in any given year during a recession. And really that's held up by, the high end of donors. They tend to kind of double down and support the causes that need them the most.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's what happens is during those times now where those major donors know we're in an economic uncertain time, they're willing to pony up a little bit more, especially if they've had more wealth assigned to them over the last several years too. But the other thing I'll say is, just normal donors were very philanthropic. When you look at the pandemic, I mean, crisis giving to specific causes, I know there was many that really struggled, but there was many that raised more money than they'd ever raised before, just from your $25 donors, just people trying to help.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, on that optimistic note, I think we can wrap up for today. As a reminder, you will receive the slides and the recording in your inbox tomorrow. And if there are any questions that we didn't get to, we will be sure to follow up with you directly via email. And just thanks everyone for taking some time out of their Thursday to circle up on this topic.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.